Hey everyone, today I am beyond excited to talk about the latest major piece of my home theater room puzzle that has arrived and has been added to the mix. If you've been following my build thread on AV Nirvana, which I'll link to in the description below, you know that last year we moved across the country, fell in love with a house, and bought it even though the theater space was less than ideal. I brought most of my equipment with me, but I left the screen behind. And between getting settled and then planning, setting up, wiring, and building out the new theater space, I went about 8 months without a theater. And I was going through some serious withdrawals. But I'm suffering no more because we are now up and running. The screen I used before was a DIY frame with SeymourAV's Center Stage XD screen material. SeymourAV is the consumer direct channel of Seymour Screen Excellence. Their entire product line is made to order in the United States, offering high quality, base level screen materials without the need to go through a dealer or custom installer. This puts professional level, industry grade screen products at an accessible price point for the DIY theater builder who doesn't want to sacrifice on quality. That DIY screen was later upgraded to Center Stage UF when a remodel brought my main listing position closer to the screen. The UF material has a tighter weave that lets you get incredibly close before it becomes visible. The trade-off is a slightly lower gain than the XD, which basically means I had to bump up the brightness in the projector just a notch, which was done when I had it recalibrated for the new screen. That screen was a 115-inch diagonal 16:9 screen that was later modified to a 2:1 aspect ratio. So here's a fun little story for full disclosure. When I ordered that original XD material from Seymour, he asked if I'd like to come out to the shop and pick it up. It was only then that I realized that not only was he based in Ames, Iowa, where I was living at the time, but he actually lived about a block away. Chris and I and our families became fast friends. We took part in numerous movie nights and theater crawls with a really great home theater community right there in central Iowa. I also helped Chris out on several customer installs, including a couple trips to CEDIA to help build screens in various exhibit booths for the heavy hitters in the industry. And when you talk with the top brass at companies like Wisdom Audio, Wolf Cinema, Steinway Lingdorf, and you hear them talk about the quality of Seymour's materials, it carries a lot of weight. And on top of that, if you go down the list of the top Hollywood audio houses where your movies are being mixed and mastered, a good number of them are using Seymour screens, and more are switching to Seymour every day. So what does acoustically transparent actually mean? It's essentially exactly what it says. An acoustically transparent screen can sit directly in front of your speakers and have little to no effect on sound quality, which is critical. For the best sounding theater room, you want to rely as little as possible on your processor's room EQ system. You've heard it before, correct the room as much as you can first before employing your processor's room correction. So much of the screen discussion today is focused on gain. Often people don't even consider the sonic properties of a screen at all. The Center Stage XD material has a minuscule 1.4 dB attenuation above 2 kHz, and the UF is down 2.2 dB above 2 kHz. Now, compared to some of the other options out there with a drop of anywhere from 4 to 7 dB or more in various frequency ranges, the attenuation of Seymour's screen materials is basically imperceptible and by far the best option. Moving up to the Seymour Screen Excellence and lighter line of screen materials offers an even flatter frequency response. To put this in perspective, the trade-offs between different screen materials and manufacturers are primarily gain, which is how much light is reflected off the screen, and attenuation, or how much effect it has on the audio. Now, not to oversimplify, with lower gain, you boost the light level from your projector. With greater attenuation, you boost the sound level from your speakers. Seems simple, right? Now, consider that any serious screen material shouldn't have any sort of color tint, and it really is just a small adjustment to the light level settings in your projector. But for audio attenuation, that material is going to affect different frequencies in differing amounts, which is why I mentioned the attenuation above 2 kilohertz. So with a big discrepancy between different frequencies, we're no longer talking about a simple volume adjustment. This is an EQ curve to correct for the screen. And that's just one more thing your processor and its room correction have to deal with. So why is this so important? Why not just put your speakers in front of the screen? Well, for one, space. I don't have a ton of space in my room, and using an acoustically transparent, or AT screen, allows me to use in-wall speakers behind the screen using little to no floor space. I chose to build a false wall with 2x4s a ½ inch in front of my actual wall, so I didn't have to tear into the drywall. I mounted triad bronze LCR in-wall speakers into the false wall, filled the rest with insulation, and covered it with a dark gray velvet to act as sound absorption in the room to help tame some of the echo. Then the screen mounts onto that false wall. But you don't need to use in-wall speakers. You can use speakers as large or as small as your budget and space allow. Just place your false wall accordingly. You don't even have to use a false wall to hide them either. Your left and right speakers can flank the sides of the screen, and Seymour sells retractable screens so you can hide speakers for movies and gaze lovingly in their tweeters for music listening. More importantly, an AT screen allows me to put each of the front 3 channels, the left, the center, and the right, across the same horizontal plane. And they're identical speakers, which means that when the action moves straight across the screen, the sound also moves straight across the screen. It doesn't dip below the screen when the action gets to the middle and then back up. Plus, it sounds seamless because the speakers are identical, which means there's no different driver configurations causing a change in tonality from speaker to speaker, or worse yet, lobing, which actually can cancel out sound frequencies, causing you to miss out on parts of the soundtrack. Lobing can be a big problem with horizontal center channel speakers that are not properly designed. Plus, I'm not one of those guys who likes to see all my equipment in the room. I used to be that guy, and there's nothing wrong if you are that guy or that girl. But the older I get, the more I just want to get lost in the movie. I don't want to see my speakers or electronics. Having speakers behind the screen, it's just a cleaner presentation and my personal preference. It's more of a minimalist look, even in a theater room that requires a bunch of equipment to function. So after moving to Seattle, it was a no-brainer that I would, again, reach out to SeymourAV for my screen. This time, however, I wasn't going to DIY the frame, and I had enough room for a native 2:1 Cinemascope ratio. The main question I had was whether to get masking panels or motorized masking to convert that Cinemascope Aspect Ratio down to HDTV's 16:9. Well, the geek in me won out, and I recently took delivery of a 124-inch diagonal 2:1 Cinemascope Aspect Ratio Proscenium Motorized masking screen with the same center stage UF material that I had been using in our old house. So the masking panels come in from the left and right sides to convert the projected area to 16:9 aspect ratio. You can also opt for a 16:9 screen with masking that comes in from the top and bottom to convert it to a scope aspect ratio. And we don't need to get into that debate here, but I chose native Cinemascope. I've long had dreams of this big, wide screen with motorized masking, but until SeymourAV launched the Proscenium line of frames, this sort of wow factor feature was simply an unattainable pie-in-the-sky dream. It was cost prohibitive and something I wouldn't have been able to justify even if I had the cash on hand. But by thinking outside the box, they've found a way to put this out there at a really, really good price. These start at just over $3,000 shipped. By creating removable velvet panels for the frame, they're able to package and ship more affordably, which has a big impact on the price. And just because they're able to ship more cost effectively does not mean they've cheaped out on shipping and packaging. This thing was impressively well packaged. Mine arrived with the box pretty clean, though Chris reports they've seen some that took more of a beating during the shipping process. But the packaging, more often than not, protects the precious goods inside. And if you do need a part replaced, it's also great to remember they're made in the USA, so you won't wind up waiting for a boat to arrive with your part on it. I think one of the biggest surprises when I opened this box up, and remember, I built and installed many Seymour screens, is that there was really not much work to assembling it at all. The masking material and motor mechanisms are already installed into the frame, so you don't have to worry about installing those pieces correctly. They recommend 2 people for putting it together, but I was able to assemble by myself and only required a second set of hands to get it up on the wall safely, with only about 1 inch to spare on each side. Once you start putting the pieces together, it becomes very obvious that this has already been assembled previously at the factory. It's been fully assembled, tested, calibrated, and set up, and then taken apart into just a few pieces that are very simple to put back together. So essentially, once you put a few pieces together, it's ready to go. It's very, very, very impressive. Each screen that Seymour sells is made to order by hand in Iowa. These are not coming off an assembly line sitting in a warehouse until you order it, which also means you can order a custom size that might be between the measurements listed on their website. Lots of flexibility and personal service on every single order. And again, you can't get motorized masking anywhere near this price, with or without this level of customer service. So once you have the frame assembled, the screen material you've chosen attaches using rubber O-rings and grommets. Once again, a really simple process. Loop the O-ring through a grommet and connect to the corresponding hook on the frame. Again, the hooks are pre-installed, pre-spaced to match the grommets on your screen material. Attention to detail. One thing that I have noticed is the center stage UF material is much lighter and more forgiving than the XD. It's a lighter material and doesn't need to be stretched on the frame. In fact, it hangs loose enough that a few of the O-rings actually came undone while I was mounting on the wall, so I just had to reach under and reconnect them to the hooks. Mounting the screen to the wall is done with the included French cleats. Attach 1 set of cleats to the wall, 1 to the frame, and you're ready to hang it. Once the screen is in place, running power to the masking system motors just involves connecting a couple cables to the wiring block in the provided switch and plugging that into a wall outlet. There's also a supplied remote for the masking system. The stopping point for 16:9 is already programmed and set into the motors, so it's really configured and calibrated right out of the box. I opted for the base control system, which has fewer options like programming additional aspect ratio stopping points, but it is upgradable in the future. Supply chain issues have caused some delays in their higher end options, and Seymour is working on a new higher end option that will involve more programmability and more compatibility with other control system options. I'll be keeping my eye on those, but for now, this setup is doing great. And the system is very responsive to the remote. So stopping it manually at those in-between points like 2-to-1 or 2-2-1 is very easy. So the big question, or questions, how does it look and how does it sound? I've talked with a lot of people over the years who worry about the lower gain measurement on the UF material, but having years of first-hand experience with these materials, unless your screen is absolutely massive or your particular projector struggles with light output, I just don't see how this screen won't work for anyone in a light-controlled room. I mean, look at these clips from The Lost City. This screen has no problem with light levels, just a glorious image. And this room isn't even completely blacked out yet. My last room was fully light controlled, but this installation is not a black room. There are windows which will eventually get full blackout shades, and my projector is a JVC X790R. It's mounted about 6 feet further back than before and lighting up a larger screen. This screen can still make us squint during bright scenes. I'm not playing tricks with the video here, this is how the screen looks in the room. I still have a few more tweaks to make, including darker paint, and then I'm planning to have the projector calibrated. Until then, I've used my primitive skills gained from 30+ years as a videographer and editor to get it close in this setup And there are zero problems with gain levels or blacks or seeing the weave of the material. The screen wall is covered in a dark gray, almost black velvet that was picked up locally, and it does a great job of disappearing once the lights are down. But as dark as it gets, look at the difference here when I set the lens memory to fill the scope screen while playing 16:9 content that's spilling onto the wall above and below the screen. There's just no comparison between the light absorption quality of the velvet that Seymour uses on the frame and the cheap stuff from the big box store. Now, folks, that's every bit as applicable to the screen material itself. I appreciate that using cheap spandex can help people get into building a projection setup, but when it comes to the sound and the visual quality, there's just nothing like a material that is developed to be perfectly white and to have a minimal effect on the sound passing through. These are highly specialized materials, not just off-the-shelf supplies. Like I mentioned, we'll eventually go darker on the walls, which will reduce the light bouncing off the walls and onto the screen, washing out the image somewhat. It's one of those things you might not even notice until you see a side-by-side comparison. There are, of course, ambient light rejecting screen options, but there are trade-offs with that as well, like the sound. I'm confident that this will be the best material for our room and for our preferences. This is a room for the main event, movie watching. When we're watching the news or most television, we're up here in the living room with the windows wide open and just watching on the Samsung QLED behind me. When it's movie night, we're popping popcorn, turning the lights out, and locking in on the big, beautiful screen in our theater room downstairs. Speaking of the materials used, notice also in these shots with the lights up that the masking material is not the same black velvet material used to wrap the frame. Once the lights are out, however, it's just as blacked out, but it does use a sheer material to make sure it's completely acoustically transparent. So moving those masking panels in front of my left and right speakers has no measurable difference in the audio quality. What is also very evident in these clips is just how much of a difference it makes having masking versus just not using part of your screen. Look at the clips from Pink Floyd, The Delicate Sound of Thunder, and John Mayer's Where the Light Is. It goes from being dark to being just as black as the frame and the screen wall, which creates better contrast in your image as well as more immersion. And in terms of sound, I can't hear it. It's literally acoustically transparent. If anything at all, it's a click on the volume dial more than having no screen in front of the Triad bronze LCR speakers behind it. It essentially has the same effect as speaker grill cloth. I would challenge anyone to use only their ears to identify the difference between their speakers with nothing in front of them and this material in front of them. I personally don't think it's possible without setting up a microphone to measure and examine frequency response curves. The motorized masking just adds an element of high-end luxury and convenience. It's a feature I didn't know if I'd ever have due to the cost, but Seymour introducing the Proscenium Motorized Masking Screen series at this price point really opens this high-end feature up to a much, much wider group of enthusiasts, which is great for me because this amazing house that we absolutely love has almost no closets. So there's nowhere to store masking panels when they're not in use. And if you don't need or want the motorized masking, or if you want to save a few bucks, the screens are available without any masking, or you can get masking panels which are fit into place with cleverly placed magnets. Overall, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm really happy with this screen. I knew going in what to expect from the center stage UF material in terms of sound and image quality, and I ordered without hesitation. The frame is solidly built, smartly configured, and easy to assemble. The masking system is installed into the frame at the factory, pre-configured and calibrated. It's easy to use and is really handy, not to mention how impressive it is to your guests. And even for myself, I love it. Having adjustable masking makes a huge difference in the image contrast, and having motorized masking is just plain cool. It gives me a nostalgic feeling of the curtains opening to reveal the screen in the theater that we frequented when I was growing up. I'd love it if I could program the masking system into my Harmony remote, but the included remote works well. I'm not planning on having the Harmony long term since they've stopped supporting it anyway, so I'll cross that bridge when it comes time to replace the remote. It's a pretty nitpicky item, but it's really all I can think of as a negative. I'll obviously be keeping tabs on their updated solution for the masking remote system, and I'll keep you all updated when there's news to report. I consider myself a videophile and an audiophile, but I'm not into measurements. I don't watch pixels or nits. I watch movies. I'm into enjoyment and experience. I want the best quality and I want it to be easy to use. This screen and masking system fits that bill. If you're someone who hasn't considered the center stage UF or even XD materials because of their gain rating, you owe it to yourself to put your own eyes on a screen and decide based on the screen itself and not the numbers. Remember, it's much easier to adjust for a slightly lower gain than it is to even out a bad audio curve. And if you've always wanted motorized masking but thought it was cost prohibitive, SeymourAV has set a new standard with this performance at this price point. Comparatively speaking, the Proscenium line of products are priced at less than half the cost of other motorized masking systems on the market. Highly recommended on all counts: screen material, sound and image, masking system, build quality, and price. So that about wraps it up on the SeymourAV Proscenium Motorized masking screen. What are your thoughts? What questions do you have for me? Leave them in the comments below, and make sure you check out the deep dive that AV Nirvana's Todd Anderson did with Chris Seymour back in February. You'll find a lot of the science and the measurements of those materials there straight from Chris. As always, make sure you like and subscribe and come join us at avnirvana.com, where there's plenty of folks just like you and me who love to nerd out about audio and video. Always a good conversation over there, so sign up and join in. I look forward to seeing you there. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching.